Hello, my name is Matthew Waddell. This is a talk on ransomware or the ransomware epidemic. I plan to cover what you need to know and how to stay safe. And as soon as I figure out how to get that working, there we go. All right, I plan to cover the following questions during this talk. Will ransomware put you out of business this year? What are your odds? What do the statistics say? You versus 99 other companies in America. Where are you? I want to cover the why of ransomware, the what it is, the who is doing it, who it attacks, who's vulnerable, where it's happening in the world, when, over what time frame does ransomware attack happen, and the specifics of how an attack happens. We're going to talk about what the survivors do before, during, after an attack. All of these matter, as the survivors are the ones that are making it through and are not going out of business. So let's study them. And finally, we're going to end with what resources you have at your disposal right now that you can use to counter this threat. So, again, my name is Matthew Waddell. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. And if you were watching this as it's presented live at Source ZeroCon, I will be on Discord, Matthew W number 7960 until they give us a better name, or I can pick a better name, will be my handle. I'll be interacting during this as this was pre-recorded, but I want to be able to answer your questions and deal with any concerns that you might have. And of course, follow me on LinkedIn because I love to connect. And I think that we're stronger through our resources. The larger our network, the more availability for help that we all have, both in professional and regular life. So let's talk about ransomware just a little bit. Actually, I should back up and say, why am I qualified to talk about this? I've been in IT security for about 20 years. Predominantly, I've been in three-letter organizations, many of which you've heard of, and a couple I guarantee you have not. I was who they called when they wanted to know who, what, where, when, how, and why an event happened. I've been doing incident response and investigations for a long time, and I was one of a handful of people in both Iraq and Afghanistan doing investigations on the front line against terrorist devices to point the way at the next target as a civilian. I've helped enterprises set up incident response plans, incident response processes, SOCs, you name it. On the security front, I've been there, and today I work at Optiv as a technical manager, leading our enterprise incident response team, and we handle digital events of a negative aspect for companies and lots of ransomware. So feel like this is a long time coming to talk about this. It's not something that is just thrown into the environment lately. It has had quite a buildup over the past 20 to 30 years of computer infrastructure. So it is just the current threat that is out there, but there's a lot of different aspects to it. So let's talk about the raw data of ransomware. You versus 99 of your peers as an organization. Where do you stand? Will ransomware put you out of business this year? Bottom line up front, yes. Statistically, you have already dealt with some aspect of ransomware, or you are going to deal with it in some capacity very soon. Let's look at the raw data and see your Vegas odds. So the average out of 100 businesses in the last calendar year, 87% of them were affected by ransomware in some manner. Of those 87%, 20% of those had their data held hostage from them, encrypted, held at gunpoint, so to speak. They did not have access to their critical data. Of those 20%, 17% said that it was their first attack, and 66% of those paid the ransom. Either 39% of those paid it themselves, or 27% the insurance company paid it for them. And most critically, of those 66% who paid, 80% of those were held a ransom a second time within 6 months. So this is what your peers are seeing. This is an average as of today. It is June 11th as I record this, 2023. This data was taken from the FBI and such, and I'll show my sources at the end so that you can fact check, keep me honest. Okay, let's talk about the actual cost of the ransom and what it's happening across your industry. The average ransom payout was $347,000. Most common payout was actually only $10,000, but a few high value targets and such were skewing this, giving us a higher average. I understand as of just a couple of days ago, before I was able to update my slides, that average, that low cost payment has come up and is now closer to $50,000. Just how the industry is going. So the largest confirmed payment to date. Now there's some scenarios out there where they said that they had a large amount, but the largest confirmed payment was for U.S. Travel Services, CWT. They paid $4.5 million to get their data back. The average cost for cleanup for those who paid the ransom, about $4.5 million. And the average cost for those who did not pay the ransom was a little over $5 million. Now, the cost of the ransom itself is just a small amount. So let's talk about the averages of what happened in a ransom. If the actual just the ransom payment is just a small amount of the overall cost, we have such things as reputational loss. Insurance premiums go up afterwards. The reputational loss is customers that are leaving you that you didn't know because they never knocked on your door because you had advertised ransom in the newspaper and in the news. You have employee morale and retention. This is an attack against your business infrastructure, and your employees are going to suffer from not being able to do their job and worrying about how the business is going to survive this. Employees will leave if you have ransom and they go through a stressful enough situation. They may say, screw this, I'm going somewhere else. You're going to have data loss. Data is the new oil. So the actual data that you have available to you when you need it to do business won't be there. Recovery and forensics cost is one of the largest ones. And I've been doing forensics for a long time, and it is by far one of the most expensive things you can do with a computer or pay someone to do with a computer is to do forensics on your data. The recovery cost of rebuilding these systems and putting them back in falls into the infrastructure cost of getting it all running again from back to where you were, getting back to your baseline. Not to mention that there are probably some legal penalties or compliance. If you're during the ransom that your data is actually taken out, you may have PII, personal identifiable information, credit card numbers, social security numbers, employee names and addresses, and customer names and addresses, and vendor names and addresses that are all released out there, and you will have to pay penalties for compliance. Not to mention the actual downtime from while you're suffering from an attack and that you can't do business as usual. You know, millions of other unknown costs and things that couldn't possibly be quantified throughout this are included. So let's talk about how the ransomware statistically gained access to your system. Well, 35% of them came in through a phishing email, according to this study. I've seen other studies that shown 80 to 90% of ransomware attacks originated with a phishing email. So I went with the lowest possible number. I believe this one was from the FBI, and showing that 35% came in. 16% came in because you have remote desktop sharing of some sort open, and there are vulnerabilities there, or poor configurations, or shared passwords, or something that caused that to be an issue. 15% came in through some form of social engineering attack, which I almost want to loop in with phishing email, as that is social engineering attack of sort, but following up through social media or phone calls or additional emails leading the client to install the software and execute the ransomware was a possibility. And then we have 34% came through various other vulnerabilities, open vulnerable software such as Log4j and other types of software issues that were unpatched, and that was how they got in. I do know that looks like a peace sign. I did not do that on purpose. So these are of one study, the statistical how the ransomware gained access. Now, finding studies online is like finding ultimate truth. It is very difficult. I can find 10 studies that say drinking coffee is good for you, and I can find 10 equal studies that say drinking coffee is bad for you. So finding the median line there of how it actually happened, probably not important. This is just one study's proof of how a ransomware event went from not having ransomware to fully having ransomware. So let's move into a full examination of all of the little aspects of ransomware. I decided to break it up this way, and because of a famous author, I like to start with why and figure out what is happening with ransomware. Because if you can answer these questions, they will change your response. Specifically, why. If we know the why something is happening, we can alter our defenses versus a different why. So what is ransomware? Why is it happening? Well, ransomware is a financially motivated attack. Now, this is important to understand why they're attacking you. Because if you understand the criminal's motivation, you can make better, more intelligent decisions. Now, their primary motive is to extort money from you, then you have a business transactions of sorts that you are being caught on the bad end of it. Many of the larger ransomware gangs have an online reputation to hold. And so understanding the who and the what they're doing is important, but the understanding the why specifically, that this is a financial motivated attack. Now, to go through a couple of the other potential attacks, it could have been rote espionage. It could be hacktivision, vigilantism, straight revenge against your corporation, sabotage, online stalking of a particular individual or entity, cyberbullying. It could be a political agenda, terrorism, intellectual property theft. You could be a pawn in the ongoing cyber warfare. It could be just for attention or curiosity. So these would all have different responses based upon why the criminal is executing ransomware in your environment. So to understand that it is for money, their goal is to hurt you, to gain money, changes your responses. So what is ransomware? Ransomware is going the wrong way. Ransomware is criminal extortion against you. It is different than just stealing money from you. That would be a business email compromise attack, and that is more dangerous, 6 times more dangerous than ransomware, but often flies under the radar and doesn't have the sexy news hitting event of when all the systems are locked and ransomware is in your environment. So it is criminal theft of your data held hostage in exchange for payment. At its most simple, they are holding something that you care about in exchange for money. And the more data, the more critical, the less replaceable that they can get your systems, the less replaceable your systems are, and that they can get a hold of them, the more willing you are to pay the ransom, which can tell you a little bit more about their motivation. If they are after your most sensitive data and any backups that you might have of that data, then you are more highly likely to evaluate paying the ransom if it's your only option to staying in business. Now, the actual ransomware itself is not malware. Ransomware should be classified as the entire series of events, because the malware that executes is just a program. It does a particular task, which is to encrypt the data and then display a message to you so that you can contact them and then establish payment. It's just one part of the entire chain of aspects that are being strung together to be ransomware. The final encryption malware itself doesn't really matter that much, despite the fact that there are many different variations of it that execute at different speeds and different capabilities. How long it went undiscovered in your environment and how it got there in the first place are some of the critical questions that you should be asking yourself when you have ransomware. So let's talk about who. I want to talk about how, but who is the ransomware is happening to and from are important. So I have to split this one into the victim themselves, you having to deal with ransomware, and the criminal that is acting the ransomware. So we're going to start with the victim, who by industry, by statistics, purely logical basis is suffering from ransomware this year. The industries here show that manufacturing is the most hit. That makes sense with their why. If it's a financially motivated attack and manufacturers are making things that they can hold hostage, that would be what I would target if I was in that game. The other things from business services all the way down to hospitality are also hit. Everyone across the industry is hit, from large corporations to small corporations are all hit, but manufacturing seems to have a very lead. Operation, the OT environment is particularly vulnerable to attack and targeted. So let's talk about the sizes of corporations. Also, between small and large corporations, what are they targeting? They're targeting both the same. Large corporations can be a target-rich environment. Sure, they have more finances available to have incident response plans, an incident response team, and a SOC and monitoring and all that, but they also suffer from having a large infrastructure. So very targeted approaches go in and destroy the large corporations differently than they do the small corporations. Small corporations do not have all of the resources, may not even have IT security on staff. So a targeted, repeatable process can be used against smaller businesses differently from the large businesses. Medium businesses, it's sort of hit or miss. You're all targeted. You're all being hit. So let's talk about the criminal a little bit, like who is running the ransomware, because we have several different factors here available to us. The same as the businesses, we have large and small criminals available. We have large billion-dollar corporations, advanced, organized mafia crime syndicates using ransomware as one of their arms, are targeting both small and large businesses. Their goal is to make money for the corporation, and they are well financed. They have an organizational structure behind them. They have HR and paid time off for their employees that are doing these. They have support channels for the customers or victims so that they can guarantee that their reputation is upheld as someone who will execute ransomware, will data exfil, will do certain things against you, but if you pay, they will return your data and help you get your infrastructure back up to a sense. That is on the large size. Going all the way down to the small size, we have small side of the criminal organization. We have small independent criminal actors executing ransomware by themselves as a part-time job, as another means of making money by getting into smaller systems and executing the ransomware and doing all of the activities themselves, and little to no reputation as to whether or not they will pay, and if they will restore data if they are paid. And not having any sort of reputation means that if you handle if you have a ransomware attacker of this caliber, you should probably not pay them. Threat intelligence plays a big deal here. That's one of the first things you want to do when you have a ransomware attack, is to determine what your attacker is. Who are they? How big are they? What is their reputation? Are they trustworthy, so to speak, as a criminal, that they're willing to help you establish your your business again after you've paid. It should be noted, though, that actually paying may be illegal. The U.S. has a 2020 ruling by the U.S. Department of Treasury Office of Foreign Assets Controls, or OFAC, it's a mouthful, and the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, that states that in most cases, actually paying the ransom is illegal. It promotes organized crime, as the larger threat actors, criminals, are typically an arm of a larger organization. They can be trafficking children, illegal drugs, counterfeiting, money laundering, corruptions, and even terrorism. So by paying a ransom, you may be indirectly funding terrorism against our own country. And so in addition, finally, the paying them encourages them to continue. I am not there with a gun to my head and no data and out of business. If you are suffering from ransomware, you have to make that decision yourself based upon all the factors. I highly suggest not paying, as it encourages them and it promotes organized crime. So let's talk about where the victims are specifically. Give you a big guess. Yay, number one, USA, we're leading the pack. We are the most targeted ones. Why do you think that is? Probably because we have the money. We are such a rich nation, and that we have so much infrastructure and businesses running, that we are a target-rich environment. They are targeting other American companies, UK and Canada, less so, but we lead the pack. So let's talk about where the criminals are coming from. This, make no mistake, this absolutely is the beginnings of World War III. This is a cyber war. Our primary people targeting us are Russia, China, and surprisingly, North Korea, with a small army of digital soldiers focused on the United States. Attribution is difficult. Figuring out who is doing something against you is very difficult. There are a lot of false flags. It's very easy to hide yourself. However, the FBI is very good at following money and showed that 74% of ransomware revenue eventually makes its way back to Russian-linked hackers. China, not far behind that, and North Korea as well. Those are the three predominant countries targeting us. And they're doing a better job of targeting and getting into our infrastructure by creating VPN standpoints and jump boxes inside the United States. So the basic geofencing doesn't do as much as it used to against these attacks. So let's talk about when. For what time frame does ransomware operate on? Statistically, the average dwell time is 43 days. You may have someone in your organization now with the intent of looking through your data, discovering backups, discovering critical nuggets of information that they can hold hostage from you, and on average, 43 days. I've seen very quick ones happening within hours of execution inside an environment to upwards of over a year of dwell time. The average right now is 43 days. The average time frame from when ransomware executes inside your environment to recovery, to going back, opening the doors again and being in business, is 9 weeks. That is no website, no ability to make transactions or take in money as an average. And we'll talk about what the survivors did that lowers that average so that we can compare that to what you're doing and see how you can do a better job. However, full recovery takes over a year. The getting back to business is an average of 9 months, but getting everything restored and back to where it should be is an over a year endeavor. This is why the ransom itself is such a small amount of everything, because the overall infrastructure improvements that have to happen once the intruder has made their way in there are so much more significant. Finally, let's talk about how ransomware gets in there. I did mention earlier that it is not just a program that is executed, but that ransomware is a series of events. It is a chain of events that starts with reconnaissance. Before I want to attack someone, I would want to know everything I could about them. This is where OPSEC, operational security, is good for you. Knowing if your CEO likes to post on LinkedIn about all the new software that they're using or any upcoming site visits is a vulnerability. You could simply tell them to do these after the fact, except for publicized events, but you can do things to close off and allow reconnaissance to get less information. Interrupting each one of these attacks on the chain is critical. The earlier and better of a job you can do, the better job you can do earlier makes a difference as it gets down towards the end. After they've done some reconnaissance, they're going to deliver a package to you. Statistically, it's going to be a phishing email with a very clever link or executable hidden as a PDF or a Word document or some method. This is where they first enter your network in some aspect. So delivering something, the defense against this is user training, letting your users know what to look for. What does a phishing email look like? What are the attributes that they should be defending against and such? So once they've delivered that, they're going to install it on your system remotely. This is difficult because modern antivirus probably won't see it. Antivirus is looking for signature-based attacks. More modern endpoint protection programs that look for behavior style analysis may determine this, but current ransomware malware is moldable. It could be a unique executable specific for your environment and very difficult to detect once it has been installed, which is where we move to their next phase, which is establishing backdoors. They're most likely not going to execute the ransomware right away. They don't have anything yet. They just have access. And they're afraid of losing that access once they have it. So they're going to start to establish command and control functions, backdoors, so that if you find and delete the initial ransomware, they have alternatives. This is where having that advanced AI endpoint protection software running on all of your systems will start to determine behavior and likely to catch and alert you that something squirrely is going on here. After they've established command and control, they're going to look around for a little while. They're going to discover, they're going to do their internal reconnaissance, and then they're going to execute the ransomware. This is the point that most organizations come into awareness that there is ransomware in their environment. They come in at the most inopportune of times, Friday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, when everyone's tired and ready to go home. All of a sudden, all the computers are locked, or after you've already gone home and they have the maximum amount of time to run out any time frames and clocks while you're not aware. No one wants to work on the weekend to fix these things, so that's when they attack. Next, they're going to ask for payment. In that execution, ideally, all of the systems will be locked, and there will be a page either on the desktop or all of your critical files will be the same file that opens up that says you need to go here and you need to pay us, and here's how long you have, and here's how much we want. And then they ideally are going to help you recover or give you your data back, and it's up to you to put it back in the right place, patch the holes as to where they got in, rebuild any systems that are broken, 1,000 other tasks and such, but it's not up to them. If you're dealing with a smaller threat actor or someone with no reputation or a bad reputation, paying them may not mean you don't get your data back and you were stuck. This happens about half the time. I think it's 49% of the time. If they're a larger organization and they actually have a reputation of helping you, there may be a chat function where you can talk to someone, not the threat actor that initially did this, not the bad guys, but someone that can help you restore your data and make sure that the decryptor that you've been given works. By the way, every decryptor has another backdoor in it, because remember that 66% of those who paid got hit again, second time in 6 months. So Studying the losers is sort of an interesting thought process, but really by learning what the survivors are doing, what the people that are doing a good job at defending their organization are doing, that's where we get the most bang for our buck. So what do they do before, during, and after an attack? Well, before an attack, what do? They prepare, they train. They train their users, they train their IT staff, they create and build an incident response plan and playbooks to follow during an attack, just in case this is your break open glass and use this guide in order to protect yourself. And they do tabletop exercises. Ideally, I would say do these once a month, but I don't know anyone that does that. 6 months to once a year is getting to be not often enough, but you need to sit down and train and practice. No team that goes out and plays in the Super Bowl or any significant game did so without practicing. And the same should go for your incident response team. For the people that make up your core responders, they should train. The survivors are doing this. You should be doing this. It is the single best lever that you can pull to defend yourself against ransomware above anything else. Training your users how to respond, what it looks like, how to recover is all the best thing that you can do. Everything else is secondary, but important. Authentication, how you access your computer. You should have long passphrases, not passwords. Longer is better, and they should be unique. How did I get into your Facebook account? I copied I presented a page to you that looked like a Facebook login, and I captured your password. Guess what my next thing is? I'm going to try that username and password combination across every known login in the universe that I can, automated, and see if you're using the same password at your bank or your corporate login, anything. Unique, long, multi-factor authentication. One of the single best things to come out lately is MFA, that I have to hit on my phone to access something here on this computer, means the odds of you having having both are pretty low. Now, there are ways around it, but it is for authentication, for access to a system, MFA is the way to go. Monitoring, watching what's happening on your systems, on your network, and to your data independently, being fed into a SIM, using a SOAR in order to get a sense of activity in your network. If you don't know it's happening, there's no way that you can defend yourself against it. Patching. A lot of times, some form of a vulnerability is how they execute, how they get from regular user to super user privileges is through an unpatched system. Setting your systems, your software, everything up to automatically update is like the patches are the manufacturer saying, we found a problem while the system or the software was in use across the public infrastructure, and we made a fix for it. Patching is important. Segmenting, keeping them separated, keeping your networks, your systems, and your data separated. Operations should have no access to finance, and vice versa. Keeping them in individual little pods means that if ransomware executes, it only access that area. Spillover being less likely, the better a job you do of segmentation and of these other controls. And finally, endpoint protection on all of your systems. Advanced AI solution. This is different from antivirus. An advanced AI solution is watching for behavior and is watching what is happening on your systems so that it doesn't matter what the malware looks like, what operating system it's running on, how it's behaving is how it triggers. There's only a couple of these that are out there. I won't list their names. Quick search online will find 1 of 4. Ask me and I'll tell you what my preference is. So, what are the survivors doing during? They're following their incident response playbook. This is something that was made with level heads, not under a stress environment. Thinking through the problem and going, this is how we will handle it. Following an established protocol so that, because it should be noted that when ransomware strikes, your team won't rise to the occasion. They will fall to their highest level of preparation. So having a playbook during this time of stress is invaluable. The playbook is written not under stress. When I write documentation, I write when at 10 o'clock in the morning, when I'm highly caffeinated and I'm thinking clearly, because I expect to follow that playbook at 3 o'clock when I'm tired and hungover. You want to write your playbook there. It needs to be thought out. It needs to cover a lot of different areas and such so that it is adequate. And then you need to follow your playbook during a ransomware attack, because that's when you're going to use it the most. During a ransomware event, I see so many customers that want to jump straight to remediation. They want to jump straight to recovering the system that was infected. The very first thing you need to do is identify all of the systems that have ransomware on it. And not every system that has ransomware on it will be displaying a message. There will be backdoors. There will be other things going on in your environment. You have to identify all of them, because you can't patch 99% of the problems. You will just have another ransomware event right away. You have to get 100% of it. Next, they contain it. If I plan to run 5K tomorrow, I get hit by a bus today, I'm no longer in the running for a 5K. And what I mean by that is, when you have a ransomware event and your business stops operating, you can't expect to hobble up and be doing business later that afternoon or the next day. You have to lock everything down. You have to consider yourself out of business for the time being while you work on figuring out what is going on. After you've identified the stuff and then contained the situation, you're going to eradicate it. I would love to say that there's a piece of software that will remove the ransomware for you. Every single one I have seen has had a backdoor in it of some sort. Just removing the malware, just removing that, it's like getting pee out of a swimming pool. It's just not going to happen. You have to rebuild from a good known gold image. That's the only way to eradicate the stuff, which falls into the recovery, where you rebuild the system, you introduce your data and your users back in for a clean environment. This takes a long time. It's very difficult to do. After, the survivors do something very unique. After they review, they sit down after the event while they're still doing larger infrastructure rebuilds, and they review what happened. They talk about how it got in so that they can patch those. They talk about it without the executives present. Sure, they talk about it with the executives at least one time, but they talk about it without the executives. They need to be in a safe space, because every single one of us learns from our failures. They discuss what went wrong so that they can fix it. And then they make a plan. They make a project management long-term goal for repairing the solutions and then making sure that that doesn't happen the same way again. Overall infrastructure building and improving. And then they go back to practice and they continue to learn and grow as a team. This is just being an experience that they went through that battle hardens them. And now they have war stories and they have things to talk about, but they continue to practice and do tabletops and get better at responding to incidents, ransomware, or anything. So, as promised, what resource do you have at your disposal today that you can use to counter this threat? Without spending $1, what do you have? I hate to spoil it for you, but the end users. The key thing is training your end users as the primary responders. The end user is the one that's going to receive the phishing attack, and treating them like your first line of defense is much, much better than treating them like some idiot that clicked on this thing. For your benefit, if you can train your end users to identify and handle phishing attacks and other digital attacks that they will be first to witness, that is the best thing your business can do. And it doesn't cost you anything other than the training. So let's imagine two scenarios. On one, the end user is treated as a liability. They are dismissed by IT. They're shamed into thinking that it doesn't matter. It's not in their job. And subsequently, they will learn to react as such. And alternatively, you can champion and treat your end users as the first line of your IT security defense. You can empower them, train them in what to look for. So let's say Sally over at finance receives a phishing email, and she is a champion for IT security, and she knows what to look for. She not only will not click on it, but she will alert her other coworkers of a new phishing that came in so that they don't fall for it either. Having your users on your side matters. They may not be technical. They may not work in security, but security is everyone's responsibility. And it bears repeating. When ransomware strikes, your team won't rise to the occasion. They will fall to their highest level of preparation. So training your users, training your IT team, training in identifying your incident response team, building playbooks, those are the most important things aside from all the other things that you can do. Segmentation, patching, keeping your training is the number one lever that you can pull to safeguard yourself from ransomware. So I ask you, are you prepared? Do you need help? Reach out. This is what I do. I love my job. Here are the sources and where I found my numbers. This is current as of, except for one or two numbers, as of June 11th, 2023. And thank you. Please reach out on LinkedIn. I love to connect. And thank you for all the questions that I'm sure came in over the Discord. And stay safe out there.